There's some alarming research that shows that our first responders are likely to miss out on between 15 to 22 years of superannuation pension when compared to other workers. There is a petition out at the moment which is hoping to increase that super rate that our first responders get to make up for this shortfall, most of which have to retire early due to no fault of their own. Welcome to another HACSU vodcast, your Health and Community Services Union, and to discuss this more, HACSU Ambulance Delegate Jan and Toby, a delegate for the United Firefighter Union Tasmania. Thanks for joining us. What are some of those reasons that our first responders are retiring early?
I like to give people the analogy of a plumber when they ask me about my job. And I say to them, because people say, I don't know how you do what you do. And we are just the forefront of a really big team. And there's a lot of us working towards a common goal. But when it comes towards the job, the trauma, if you're a plumber, you know that one day you're going to have your arms in poo. You train for it, you know it's going to happen. And paramedics and firefighters, we are trained for specific things. What we don't train for is the psychological effect. How do we wind down? How do we process these things? And not just that. There's moral trauma. If you look back and look at a case, as we all do, and we might think, look, what could I have done better? And you realise, you know what, I don't think that we were very well staffed. I don't think I had the right gear. I know something was out of date and I couldn't use it. You know, I should have done better. And then you think about this, and it builds and it builds, and that's one of those things that you lose sleep over. That's one of those things that then you're in a bad mood and it affects your family. And these are all the sort of reasons that people end up quitting their jobs. Everyone's got an exit strategy. And from my checks just recently, the average lifespan of a paramedic is 6.5 years. That's from the Australian government. So 6.5 years for something that took you 3 years to get that qualification. No longer are people looking at careers as first responders, that's something they'll be able to sustain for their whole life.
Just talking about the moral injuries, is that something that firefighters...
Like both firefighters and paramedics, they're in a role, and this is a good thing, like they potentially could save a life. And they're dealing with people in their worst time of need. I think that alone is something that's worth acknowledging and supporting. A little bit unknown about firefighters and paramedics in particular is firefighters are also exposed to quite a fair bit of mental stress, and paramedics in turn are exposed to quite a lot of physical stress. So everyone knows that firefighters go in and rescue people from houses with those sort of jobs, but there's also the mentally demanding implications or after dealing with that after a job's finished. And then all of a sudden you just go to one traumatic or challenging incident after the other, particularly with the first responder jobs, that starts accumulating. So for me, I had times then when I didn't want to come to work, and I had to work out my own process of dealing with that.
What's going through your mind when you're going to a job? Is what is physically and mentally happening to you? Is it fight or flight? Is it...
Wow, interesting one. You go through all your processes, and I'm sure this is the same for you, that you're just thinking it's quiet in the truck and probably quiet in the ambulance. Everyone is systematically working out exactly what they need to do for this job to get everything on page and everything to the best of our ability. And you want to make sure that you are able to deal with anything that's thrown at you. Of course, when you turn up at the incident, it ends up being vastly different to what you're expecting.
And it's funny because I'm sure some of our listeners and viewers won't be surprised by the analogy of a duck. It's a duck sitting on nice calm water, and underneath its legs are doing this. And it's one of those things that as a first responder, you are expected to be cool, calm, collected with your decisions, make decisions, follow through with them. And it's really daunting. They're prematurely leaving the industry because they're being set up for post-traumatic stress. They're not supported. We just have these expectations of our first responders And yet the reality is there's only so much we can do. And we need that support. And a part of that in the background is knowing that we'll be supported when we retire.
For people that are out there risking their lives, their mental health, their physical health, their stability, their relationships, it feels as though even the retiring age should be lowered, and then the superannuation needs to reflect that.
The pension age, which is 67 years old. And then if we've got firefighters and paramedics retiring 7 years before that, they're chomping into their savings before they're getting that discount or that sustainable discount at a later age in their life. So by the time they get to their pension, they've already eaten away all their superannuation. Our superannuation isn't designed for that. And this is an immense stress that's placed on our families as well. So those families that we talk to, which are there to support us when we come back from these challenging jobs, they're dealing with us having that post-traumatic stress or trying to debrief from those situations. They're also dealing with us in a job, like particularly for firefighters, we've got a lot of presumptive legislation around cancer. We're in a job that potentially we might have illnesses such as cancer later on in our life. That's added stress. So throw on the financial burden of not being able to afford to look after their family members at home. I can't describe how difficult that will be.
But also keep in mind, emergency service workers, first responders, are shift workers. And we know that working night shifts is going to decrease your lifespan by a good 10%.
Yep. And then
And do you really want, and this is one of the great slogans that that our colleagues were using, is, do you want me at 67 fighting fires, lifting things? An expectation to finish work at 67 is quite reasonable. Say if you're a non-physical job, you're a professional. But someone who is expected to do highly energetic things, you try doing CPR for more than 2 minutes. All of these things take a lot of effort. You want someone in their almost 70s to do that? And then look at all the skills we need to have, all the things we need to maintain. You can't sustain that.
no.
And so how are we then supposed to make it all the way to that career? And if our superannuation doesn't reflect that, we're at a deficit. And then are you going to put your hand up and say, I think I need to quit, or are you going to keep working because you can't afford not to?
The pressure that you'd be under to never make a mistake. We're humans. I'd have encyclopedias of mistakes. I don't know, how do you deal with that? That you literally, if you make a mistake, it could be life or death.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's the reality.
And it is. And there are some people that get into the career, and I am certain similar in the firefighting side of things, that you figure out really quickly that this is not the job for you because you don't want to be put under that pressure, because it's monumental. And if you mess something up through fault of your own or just through accidentally messing something up, there's lives at stake and you're going to be held accountable.
The amount that plays on your mind is immense. We're there to normalise a scene, and we have to do that as professional and considerate as possible. Well,
I feel like your values are compromised sometimes.
okay.
It's interesting because we were just talking about this.
Yes.
When I started my career, I could tell you a week's worth of the jobs that I did, who I spoke to, which jobs, which medications I used. I've been doing this job for a little while now, and I cannot tell you by the end of my shift who the first person that I looked after was. That's not because I didn't care about them. That's because my defense mechanism to stop attracting all of this stress is I need to just dump all that information and be 100% focused on my next patient. That's surely a reflection that I need to do something. Does it mean that I don't care? No, but I have to provide that boundary. And I would say it's the same.
Exactly, and that is my coping mechanism as well. Like, once again, I've forgotten how many people I've worked on over the years and the amount of fires I've been to. However, like, Tasmania is particularly unique in the fact that we all sort of go searching for a little bit of information, because it potentially, with that smaller amount of people living here, we might know someone who's been involved in that, and we could potentially do a podcast on just the mental traumas of these two jobs alone. But yeah, it's an interesting implication that is a bit different from the other states in Australia.
And that goes to that moral trauma as well. Am I a bad person because I'm not remembering all of these things? Should I be carrying that baggage with me? Is there something wrong with me if I don't?
You also have the, talking in values, firefighters and paramedics are very considerate of others. They're in the job because they want to help people. They sometimes forget that they are people as well, and that need to help each other as firefighters and paramedics can soon be omitted from that because they feel like they've got an obligation to be as steadfast, as hardy, and there's that stigma behind us being brave and bold and not putting all that emotional trauma aside. But it does catch up on us. So when we finish a job, it's not just a debrief, we switch off and then we go home. You start thinking over in your head and you start going, did I do everything right? And those thoughts, they can last up to weeks, months even, if we don't seek help and get on top of that quickly.
When you both started, how many people do you think have left in that period from the...
That's very hard for me to sort of count those numbers. There's been a lot of people. Sort of the one consistency I've seen and the constant with this has been people retiring early just because of the need to, either physically, emotionally, or just realising that the job is not for them.
I could count on one hand the people that I started my career with that are still following that career.
And how long's that?
Almost 15 years. So
To retire tomorrow, given any of the reasons, and there's so many of them, which takes the choice really out of your hands, what would your life be like? Like, what would you do?
I would be relying heavily on my family members to sort of support me in that need.
I feel that we're all a good 3 paychecks away from bankruptcy. We need to set this up, like I was saying earlier, as a benchmark for people that are in first responding, for people that are in the health industry. We need to set this up as a benchmark so that those that are supporting the community can then get supported themselves, because inevitably it's not a sustainable career and you're really set up to fail eventually.
How can people get involved?
I wanted to extend a very large thank you to everyone who's supported us so far. And please, we have a petition that we've currently got going around that will probably be attached to this podcast, I believe. So if you can get there, you can share the petition around and just sign your name to it. You're really going to go a long distance to supporting all emergency first responders across Australia as well.
That's true. And like I was saying, this then sets a precedent for colleagues in other unions as well. Once we get over that first hurdle, and then we can use that as a reason to give more benefits to other colleagues. And that's where we're heading. We need to do better for all of the people that are supporting our community.